Ben Burgess has coin flip politics. He's good 50% of the time. Well, he might be good here then, so brace yourselves. We're not going to be playing a game for this one. This one's like we're focusing. We're focusing. Why are your bones on fire? I don't get it. I don't understand this. I don't understand what you're trying to say. Amazing. Trigger warning. The Ukraine is going to be invoked. As in calling Ukraine the Ukraine.
Heard comments from you about the war in Ukraine, certainly that make me wonder what your perspective is on that, right? Like, in other words, like, is it possible or desirable for the left to sort of keep an independent perspective that is opposed to escalating U.S. intervention in the world with all the horrible things that's going to lead to, and so often has led to, but does so without sort of falling into support for whoever the U.S. happens to be.
Can I just say that Norman Finklestein sounds weirdly like Jordan Peterson, because he's just Kermit-like voice as well? Is it okay for me to say that?
Opposition to, if that question makes sense to you?
Yeah, of course it makes sense to me, because I came from a generation where we, it was...
I did some landscaping, actually, so I know it's tough work. Believe it or not, I actually did some landscaping, sort of.
U.S. imperialism was the enemy of humankind, and you support anyone against U.S. imperialism wasn't really even a tough question. There were a couple of exceptions in my generation. One exception was, of course, Israel, which was a U.S. ally, and the Arab world is part of the third world. Yet many people on the
Their names both have 5 syllables. That's right, Glitch Master. That's right.
Left were going to support the U.S. in regard to the state of Israel. That's changed quite a lot. But that was one exception. But in general, if you're a person of the left, you were going to be hypercritical of what was called, accurately in my opinion, U.S. imperialism. Now things have changed.
Yes, U.S. imperialism is when you help Ukraine defending itself against Russian genocidal war. Perfect summary, Mr. Peter Finklestein. Thank you.
Very dramatically. I would say this is the first time in my lifetime that there is no left critical of U.S. policy towards Ukraine, towards in the context of
Oh gosh, what a Freudian slip. I want to hear it again.
the war in Ukraine. When I say
I want to hear that again.
critical context of the war in Ukraine of U.S. policy towards time, that there is no left critical of U.S. policy towards Ukraine, towards.
Wow. It's the first time in my lifetime that there's no left that's critical towards U.S. policy in Ukraine. Oh, oops. Jesus. What a slip. I wonder if in this guy's mind, the left should have been critical of, I don't know, because you know how people say that Euromaidan was a project of the CIA? Well, I've had people coming into this stream, into my stream, and telling me that actually the entirety of the Polish Solidarity movement was just a CIA project, a pet project of the CIA, and it had nothing to do with Polish people or what they wanted. No, it was just a CIA psyop or something, the whole Solidarity movement. So there you go. Everything is CIA, and no Slavic countries have any autonomy or anything at all. There you have it. It's just all CIA pet projects, I guess.
In the context of the war in Ukraine. When I say critical,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying necessarily condemnatory.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying there is no criticism at all. There's not even
amazing. Amazing coming from the guy that said that Russia had the moral right to invade Ukraine. No, that is such critical analysis to say that Russia had the not even geopolitical or anything. No, no, moral. It's moral. How critical of Finklestein.
on the large parts of the left, actually virtually the whole left, there are marginal exceptions. There is not even a willingness to hear out criticism.
Yeah,
So
I
to
mean,
take the most
if the criticism will be basic bullshit like, oh, it's all about NATO, it's all about the CIA coup, then no, I'm at this point, no, I'm not even gonna hear it out. Yeah, correct. Well, then again, I'm not even the target sort of described person by Finkelstein. Finkelstein is describing the left in the US, and he doesn't care about me. I'm a Polish person. I'm a Slav. I'm just a pawn between Russia and Ukraine. Not Ukraine, or between Russia and the US. Now I had a slip. I'm just a pawn. And so are the Ukrainians, for that matter. Maybe because a lot of the left probably agrees that Ukraine has the right to defend itself.
obvious example, there would, of course, even among liberals,
Even among them.
there would have been
Damn.
some congressional hearings
Damn.
in which a variety of witnesses would speak to the conflict at hand. So you would,
What are you saying?
why hasn't the so-called left in Congress just called for a hearing on Ukraine?
Mm-hmm.
You don't
Okay.
have to agree with John Mearsheimer. You
No.
don't have to agree
Wait, what?
with
Uh-oh.
John Mearsheimer on Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to agree with John Mearsheimer.
Oh no. Mearsheimer mentioned. Okay.
You don't have to agree with Jeffrey Sachs.
Oh gosh, Jeffrey Sachs.
You don't have to agree with these eminently mainstream people. We're not talking about wild leftists in the wings.
Okay. Mearsheimer, the leftist in the mainstream.
We're talking about solid mainstream people. Just a hearing. Just a hearing. No hearings.
I heard them, and what they said was Mearsheimer. Oh yes, the realism. This realism.
It's really, I never experienced something like this. I never thought it was even, I never could conceive it. Nowadays, when I want to hear the latest dissenting opinions on
Okay.
Ukraine, I turn into this guy, Colonel McGregor, who's, I think, a pretty right-wing person,
Mm-hmm.
but very critical of the war in Ukraine.
Why do you... Interesting. Why do you seek out voices that are critical of the war in Ukraine? I'm sorry, at this point, it's basically like saying, oh, it's like turning back to the 40s, or, yeah, 40s basically, and saying, yeah, I don't really see many voices that are allowed to sort of be critical of the Allies fighting Hitler. I don't know. I seek out those sort of voices that are critical. Not many, not many. How unfortunate. How we've fallen that I cannot even find many voices that get a hearing that are against the Allies fighting Hitler. Sure.
I listened to John Mearsheimer, who I count as a friend, but he would be the first to say he's quite conservative in his politics. He's a graduate of West Point. He's an advocate of what he calls realism in politics.
Exactly. In international relations theory.
This is not a wild-eyed leftist. He's a very nice guy, and he's been very kind and generous to me. But leftist, he's not.
Mm-hmm.
No. Not with his theories. No.
And Jeffrey Sachs is just a solid liberal. He has on his conscience that he destroyed the Soviet Union during the Yeltsin years, and probably has maybe 40 million corpses in his skeletons in his closet because of the advice he gave to Yeltsin, which Yeltsin dutifully followed. But he's a solid scholar for sure. He was a wunderkind at Harvard at age 28, I guess. He was already a star. So you don't even invite them to a hearing?
Yeah, so I wonder if there's a distinction here.
Whenever Bernie or AOC get a criticism on their Ukraine, their blind support, what do they say? Quote, who's paying you? Who's paying?
True.
It can only be somebody who's being paid.
Oh, Jesus, get to the point. Like, this is so... This is so meandering.
That might have questions about sending $100 billion to the Ukraine with not even a congressional hearing.
So I wonder if there's a distinction to be made here about the left in the sense of elected politicians who are somewhat aligned with the left, although often very disappointing, and the left.
I wish I would just be sent. I wish it would not be stuck. This is from 11 months ago, so of course the situation was a little bit different. The aid was actually flowing back then. Good old times when aid was actually flowing. Take me back. Take me back.
Left in the sense of Jacobin magazine or
Hello, holy lazy duck. Hello. What brings you to the stream apart from the fact that I'm a duck-themed streamer?
Or current affairs or DSA even, as an organization, that they have because I do see a lot more criticism of Ukraine policy from those quarters, right? From people like Branko Marcetic, who writes all the time about it in Jacobin. We could also add people like, obviously Noam Chomsky, leftists don't get much more prominent than that, who's been, extremely critical of American Ukraine policy. So it does seem like there are...
Yeah, it does seem like there are a lot of those fanatics that are just principally against the US and whatever it does, even if it means that you just put blindfolders and don't notice Russia trying to rebuild an empire and quite literally waging a genocidal war against its neighbor. But who cares about that? The US is so bad. Let's not lose our sights of what's important.
Very critical voices on the left. But what I do agree with is that those voices do not have an echo in the halls of Congress.
Good.
I think there's overwhelming pressure for people to shut up about that. And
good. Zero tolerance for bullshit. Good. I'm happy about this. Good. I'm happy that was the case 11 months ago.
Fortunately, I don't know that the left, such as it is in the United States, is so weak. I don't know that it's in much position to impose pressure.
If this is what the left is supposed to represent in the US, then it should stay weak. It should stay as weak as possible if this is the principle that it basically represents. Criticizing a country, defending itself against a genocidal aggressor. That's just great.
Pressure in the other direction.
Well, first of all, I would have to quarrel with you a little bit, a quibble rather than quarrel.
Yeah.
Quibble with you.
Quibble.
You named Branko Markovic and you mentioned Noam Chomsky. I would add Aaron Mate, and I would still say you can count them all on the fingers of one hand. I still think
I don't
you
care.
can count them all on the fingers of one hand. That's not a great showing. The second point is, I don't think, I'm not forcing people, coercing people, demanding of people that they agree with me. I recognize that people can agree to disagree on a certain range of issues. I do not think it's within reasonable grounds to quarrel with the fact that Russia for 30 years, since the era of Gorbachev.
Again, that we're going to get into this because this is an argument that just boils my blood as a Polish person.
Has constantly been stating, stop this NATO expansion.
Well, maybe if Russia did not invade all of its neighbors again, maybe if Russia did not have its endless empire-like ambitions, maybe then the expansion would end. Alas, countries like Poland, I can speak for the country that I live in, sort of like their independence, sort of like their sovereignty that is being just taken away. It's just a thing that Polish people sort of are fond of after having lost it so many times. And so, a pretty good bet of sort of keeping the sovereignty after a pretty long time of not having it before 1989, Poland decided, hey, let's join NATO to sort of make sure that Russia, when it gets back on its feet, will not just be able to, get a grip on us once again and this time not let go. It's pretty logical if you ask me. And there were several other countries that came to this very same conclusion. And you can call it NATO expansion all you want. You can call it sort of provoking Russia, whatever that means at this point. Yeah, sure. Russia gets provoked by anything. Russia gets provoked by countries wanting to feel safe from Russia. That is the reality of it. Oh, our neighbors want to have tools to defend themselves against us. That's basically tantamount to provocation, isn't it?
Stop this NATO expansion. I thought that we were going to now create a confederation.
And interestingly enough, very interestingly enough, in 1993, I believe, there was a meeting of Boris Yeltsin and was it Lech Wałęsa? Jesus, I think it was Lech Wałęsa. And Yeltsin basically said, oh no, there's no problem with Poland joining NATO. It's actually not a threat to Russia at all, and everything's cool. It's all good. And then Russian politicians pressured him, and he sort of just walked it all back and said, oh, actually, yeah, it is a problem. Don't join NATO, Poland. We're warning you. Cool. So yeah.
Of Europe. What is with this NATO expansion?
I don't know. I think I can put some names on it. Chechnya, Georgia, Ukraine. makes you think, why would people want to join NATO? Which, yeah, you have to voluntarily join NATO. NATO doesn't expand in that sense, that it just expands and gobbles up countries into it. That was the modus operandi of the Soviet Union, expanding and just gobbling up countries and taking away their freedom. That was the Soviet Union. You have to want to be in NATO, you have to apply to be in NATO, and NATO has to agree to accept you. If countries near Russia felt safe enough not to have the need to join NATO, then they would not join NATO. There would be no expansion happening. But the reality of the situation is that Russia is a pretty aggressive country, and so pretty, dare I say, expansionistic country, and therefore Poland and many other countries were basically left with not many other options than to just join NATO.
And that Russia has, for 30 years, tried to find a reasonable diplomatic resolution.
Yes, by attacking Chechnya, Georgia, and Ukraine. That is what we call finding a reasonable diplomatic solution. I'm so impressed. I'm so impressed by the efforts of Russia to find a reasonable diplomatic solution to all of this.
Of the problems in Ukraine, where
Oh yeah, for sure. Those diplomatic and sensible solutions to problems in Ukraine, where you're basically gonna be our vassal states, much like Belarus, and you're gonna like it. This is reasonable and diplomatic on our side. Sure, technically speaking, you could call that diplomatic, but reasonable? That also, again, depends reasonable for whom. I bet it's very reasonable for Russia, but is it reasonable for Ukraine? But then again, who cares about Ukraine? Ukraine is just a pawn between the US and Russia, much like Poland, so who cares? Who cares really what is it reasonable for Ukraine, right? Nobody cares. Nobody cares.
where people differ is whether Russia, having been systematically and methodically rebuffed for 30 years.
What does that even mean? Rebuffed for 30 years. There was so much investing in Russia by Western. It's not even funny. There was so much trying to normalize relations with Russia. Also not even funny. Don't give me that bullshit. Rebuffed.
And as facts were changing on the ground towards fully integrating Ukraine de facto into NATO.
That's also actually pretty bullshit statement. Ukraine wasn't even on the road to becoming part of NATO as far as I know. That is one huge bullshit excuse. And even if it were, it would be perfectly in its right to, considering, the situation that we're finding ourselves in right now. There would be no invasion if Ukraine was in NATO. Come on. Or maybe if Russia would be stupid enough to do it, then there would be, but we'd be having a totally different war then, right now.
Whether a threshold had been crossed such that Russia had the right to attack, versus those who say, yes, it's true, Russia was provoked.
No, it wasn't. I'm sorry. Like, it's not provocation for countries around Russia to be rightfully wary of Russia's imperial ambitions and to wish to join an alliance that will deter Russia from invading. That is not a provocation. It can only be a provocation from the perspective of a person that has no clue about this region of the world and its history. That is the reality of it. That is just the reality of it.
Provoked, but the provocations weren't of a significant enough magnitude as to
I reject this whole provoked thing. It's bullshit.
justify a Russian invasion. So there, I would say, between their position and my own, which is they had the right to attack, yes, I could say reasonable.
I'm sorry, Russia has this talent of basically pushing countries into the arms of NATO. In fact, there are a few new additions to NATO now, thanks to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So what are we even talking about? Russia has just this charm that makes everybody in the vicinity want to join NATO. It's a superpower. And then Russia calls it provocation.
People can disagree. I have not written any of them off. However, you use the expression whether the people in Congress had sufficient heft, power, whatever you want to.
You said Russia had the moral right to invade Ukraine. You have no leg to stand on this topic. Absolutely none.
Sorry, Norm. I just want to interrupt you because that's not quite what I said. What I said was that the grassroots left isn't in a position to exert much pressure.
Thank God. If the grassroots left represents supporting Russia in its invasion of Ukraine, then I don't care for grassroots left very much.
On politicians. So in other words, I think that
I just don't care much for this sort of grassroots left. It can stay weak.
Politicians, I think, are often buffeted from different directions. Ideally, they're tools that we can get them to do things that we want.
I agree with that, but nothing prevented them from calling for hearings.
No,
nothing prevented
if the question is,
hearings.
Would it have been better if
they had congressional hearings on Twitter?
Sure,
they could have had hearings.
So if the question is, would it have been better if there were hearings? Then I agree with you.
No, if I just don't. No, I don't have patience for bullshit. No.
Where I would, I think, maybe not just quibble, but perhaps even quarrel. Is on two questions I'd like to separate, right? Because I think there's one of them that we agree on and one of them we disagree on.
All right.
So I think the one that we agree on is there a very big problem with United States policy toward the war in Ukraine? Was NATO expansion?
Yes, there is a very big problem of U.S. policy towards Ukraine, especially now freezing aid. But the big problem till now was the very slow giving of aid and it being spread out. But I bet that's not exactly what this person's talking about, is it?
A bad idea? Is current U.S. policy not doing anything to?
Yes, it is a totally horrible idea to allow countries to keep themselves safe from Russia. Oh yes, absolutely a horrible idea. Poland should have absolutely been folded back into Mother Russia. True and real.
To do peace.
Russification did not go far enough during the Russian Empire period. Yes.
negotiations, but instead just pouring more and more money into the conflict.
And sabotage peace
Does
negotiations.
that make
Oh yeah, totally. Because the thing that sabotaged the negotiations, the Bucha massacre, that was obviously done by the U.S., right? That was obviously done by the United. Oh wait, no, it wasn't. It was done by Russia. At which point the negotiations were basically dead in the water. Oh no. Oh. Oh crap. Damn.
escalation to potentially terrifying levels more likely? All of that stuff, I think you and I agree on. I think that what we do disagree on is the justification question. In other words, that you could say that as a separate issue from whether U.S. policy towards Russia and Ukraine was justified, you could say, was Russia justified in invading Ukraine? And I would just posit that, if we imagine a directly, as parallel a situation as we can come up with, that there was like there was a civil war in Mexico, and there were like American-backed separatists who were on one side of it, and then there was like a leftist government in Mexico City that wanted to join the Warsaw Pact on the other side of it.
Wait, what? What is
this
weird hypothetical? What?
Civil war. Just justified, could say, was Russia justified in invading Ukraine?
I'm sorry, what?
And I would just posit that, if we imagine...
Jesus, what am I listening to right now?
A directly, as parallel a situation as we can come up with.
Okay.
That there was like there was a civil war in Mexico.
Civil war in Mexico. There's no... What civil war?
And there were like American-backed separatists who were on one side of it, and then there was...
What?
Like a leftist government in Mexico City that wanted to join the Warsaw Pact.
Warsaw Pact?
On the other side of it, and that even though it hadn't officially joined, it seemed like it might one day, and it was becoming more integrated with the Eastern Bloc.
There was no civil war in There was no civil war in Ukraine. What the hell are we talking? What civil war in Ukraine?
Under those circumstances,
there was no civil war in Ukraine.
Might the U.S. invade? Yeah, I think it might invade. But you and I would be marching in anti-war protests.
Yeah,
we would be opposed to that.
Before
What a tortured comparison. I know. It's... Jesus.
I spoke with you this evening, I spoke with Glenn Greenwald.
Yep.
And of course, the question of Ukraine came up.
Yeah.
And everybody makes this analogy. And as I said to Glenn, and now I'm going to say to you,
What is this analogy?
the question is, does the analogy work?
No, it doesn't.
So,
It's a shit analogy, but it doesn't change anything. Actually. Ben Burgess wrote a book on logic. I see. You should send it to me. I could read it. God.
let's take the case of Mexico or the comparable case of Canada. Either of the
Sure. Let's follow this. Let's follow this twisted logic train. Wow. Oh my goodness. I wasn't even shown the premise. There was no civil war in Ukraine.
countries in our border.
Mm-hmm.
Has the United States ever had to deal with an invasion from Mexico? Has Mexico ever invaded the United States?
So if it had,
Wait, hold on. Okay, let's see where this is going. Because I don't know what is supposed to be what in this comparison. What has Ukraine ever invaded Russia? I guess would be my What?
Would that be sufficient to justify
Let's
it?
just go through the basic questions to see whether the analogy holds up. Did
Okay.
Mexico ever invade the United States?
So, given that it hasn't,
Okay.
you think
And
that's
Canada,
enough
Canada
to show?
hasn't. Okay.
Yeah,
Now,
I mean, it hasn't, but they have
let's telescope the whole question. Let's
Okay.
turn to Russian historical memory.
Okay, has Ukraine ever invaded Russia?
Russian historical memory.
Russian historical memory. What a phrase. What a turn of phrase, if I've ever heard one. I want to say, what does that even mean? Russian whatever.
Of the 19th century. You take Tolstoy. He's writing a novel at the end of the 19th.
He sounds so much like Peterson. I just can't. Oh yeah, the 19th century Russia. The good old nostalgic days when Poland was basically just part of the Russian Empire. Good old days of Russification in Poland.
19th century. It comes
Finklestein would say Ukraine is invading Russia by acting sus or something. True.
to be called War and Peace. He wants to conjure the soul of the Russian people.
Okay.
What does he choose for the subject matter of his novel, his great novel? He chooses the War of 1812.
Okay.
The French invasion of Russia.
All right.
That's what weighs most on the historic memory of the Russian people.
That is great. Last time I checked, Ukrainians were not French. I never thought I'd have to point this out. I never thought that would be a thing that I would have to say. But Ukrainians are in fact not the French. I don't know where this is going.
From the 19th century. Let's go to the 20th century.
Okay, who invaded Russia in the 20th? Oh, the Nazis, of course.
What's the great memory of the Russian people of the 20th
The Barbarossa. Sure.
century? The Great Patriotic War. What's the Great Patriotic
Operation Barbarossa, in which Ukrainians were used as Soviet soldiers, as Soviet citizens to fight against the Nazis, which of course I don't think Mr. Finklestein here will acknowledge even.
War? The Nazi invasion that wiped
Yeah, the Nazi invasion of the Soviet Union, which included Soviet Ukraine, but I guess we're just gonna gloss over that point, right? It wasn't an invasion of Russia, it was the invasion of the entirety of the Soviet Union, Ukrainian part included.
wipes out at minimum 27 million Russian people.
Russian people! 27 million Russian people!
27 at minimum, the Nazi invasion that wipes out at minimum 27 million Russian people.
Oh wait! What do you know? The Soviet Union lost around 27 million people, which means it included Ukrainians. But according to Finklestein here, it was at minimum 27 million Russian people. Sure.
27 million is not a trivial figure. The United States lost about...
Shoot me, please. Shoot me.
400,000 soldiers in World War II. Great Britain lost about 400,000. Altogether, about 800,000. Just in the Battle of Leningrad, what's called the 800 Days, the Siege of Leningrad. There was a famous book by Harrison Salisbury, the foreign editor of the New York.
I gotta look it up. Oh, Jesus. No. Wow.
New York Times called 800 Days. Just in the Battle of Leningrad, just one city, about the estimates are 1.5 million people were killed. 1.5 million. That's
I have no idea what that has to do with Russia having the right to invade Ukraine, especially since Soviet Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union that was being invaded, part of the casualties. It was not 27 million Russians.
twice.
10 super bad. I'm sorry, the 27 million Russians sealed it for me. It's very bad. It's the worst. It's the worst crap. This guy, I'm sorry, Eastern Europe might not be this guy's sort of field, but as an academic that is supposedly good on Israel Palestine, if you're gonna talk about any topic, as an academic, you should know to do your due diligence before opening your mouth. Because otherwise you're just gonna spout bullshit like what we're getting here. Like, what am I supposed to make of this? I might as well end the thing here. Like, once I hear that 27 million Russians died during the Great Patriotic War, I might as well just not believe anything else that he says. It's so bullshit. He doesn't know anything. He didn't look into anything. He didn't bother. He just has his belief about NATO and then just creates a very convenient narrative going back in history. It's very nice, very nice. I have no idea what Napoleon's France has to do with NATO, by the way. Because guess what? Guess what? Apart from wanting to conquer Russia, Napoleon's France also did some other things. You know, conquering the entire rest of Europe, which the entire rest of Europe also didn't quite enjoy. You know, Germany, etc. Those places that the French Empire under Napoleon conquered. Do those not count? Oh no, yeah, of course. Napoleon was basically a proto-NATO thing. This is such bullshit. This whole narrative that it goes back to Napoleon having a boner for Russia in particular, which it didn't. Actually, France had a big thing against England, but
The total casualties of the US and UK during World War II. That's the memory that weighs on the Russian people.
I'm sorry.
World War were killed. One city, about twice the total casualties of the US and UK during World War II.
oh, okay.
That's the memory that weighs on the Russian people.
What about the memory that weighs on the Ukrainian people? What about the memory that weighs on Polish people? You know, Poland that was just sold out after the war to be a satellite state of the USSR. You know, the Polish memory of the Warsaw Uprising where the Soviet army just stayed on the other part of the river and allowed Polish civilians to be massacred by the Nazis without lifting a finger to help. What about that mem? Oh wait, I forgot. I almost forgot. Poland and Ukraine are just pawns in a big chess game between the US and Russia. I forgot my place. I'm sorry. I apologize. Sorry.
Now you might say, what do you know? The Russian people, what do you know? I'll tell you how I know. I'm pushing 70. Vladimir Putin.
Oh shit! Have I considered that this guy is pushing 70? Have I considered... Oh damn, wow. That's a strong... I have to admit, I've not considered that. Oh, okay, that changes everything. You're pushing 70. What am I to make of this? Okay, you're pushing 70.
Is 70 years old.
Oh, so you're similar age to Vladimirovich Putin. It, what?
He's my age cohort. If time allows you,
I mean, this guy is supposedly pretty good on Israel-Palestine, so I'm not gonna comment on that. I'm not, like, I don't know. I just don't know. I know that he's crap on Ukraine, but I have no idea. He's supposedly a pretty good academic when it comes to Israel-Palestine, but here, no.
and if you want to, use it later in the broadcast, because I don't want to detain you now, you go to Wikipedia. You enter the name Vladimir Putin, and then they have it broken up into sections, and one section is called childhood.
Oh, damn. The poor childhood of Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin.
Okay? The whole childhood. Look at it yourself. Fortunately, your viewers can just check me after they hear my remarks. The whole childhood is about one thing. One thing. Relatives killed during World War II.
Oh, shit. Oh, no. Because that totally is not the case for Ukrainian people, or for Polish people, for that matter. Totally not. Yes. Absolutely not. We all know that of the entirety of the Soviet Union, only Russian people lost close ones due to Operation Barbarossa. Yeah. Of course. What am I even supposed to say to this bullshit? It just baffles the mind. Yes, Russian people were uniquely targeted by the Nazis in Barbarossa because just the Nazis had this instinct. They just avoided and spared all other ethnicities of the Soviet Union and just laser pinpointed Russians only. So by that quirk of history and nature, only the Russians have lost relatives during Barbarossa. Yes, that is what many historians say in their famous books.
That's it. About the father, about the mother, about the brother, about the sister. That's it.
Yes, uniquely Russian perspective of World War II. This guy's from the US, right? It's fine. It's not like, for example, my great grandfather was shot in the ghetto. It's not like my grandmother's brother was shot during the uprising in Warsaw. It's fine. It's like only Russian people lost relatives during World War II. It's known. It is known.
That's how they remember. That's how Putin remembers. And guess what? That's how I remember World War II. Because that's all, as I said to you already a half hour ago. That's all we talked about at home. That's the only memory. And so now, what do the Russian people see? What does the Russian government see? Not just Putin, the whole government. What do they?
Hold on. Oh, let me check. Wait, hold on. Finklestein is Jewish. Born in New York City to Jewish Holocaust survivor parents. His mother grew up in Warsaw and survived the Warsaw Ghetto. Now my mind is just boggled. Well, my great-grandfather did not survive the ghetto. There we go. I just... Hello, Gabriel things. I'm dumbfounded. After all that bullshit about the unique perspective, the unique experience, the unique historical memory of Russians losing relatives in the war, Holocaust survivor parents, mother survived the Warsaw Ghetto because his mother grew up in Warsaw. Amazing. This is just fantastic.
They see a Ukraine which has an oversized Nazi presence in it.
No, it does not. Bullshit. Give me some citation on this. Soviet Ukraine was invaded by the Nazis in the Barbarossa project. May I remind you that Ukraine was at that time divided into Soviet Ukraine, which was part of the Soviet Union, and also Western Ukraine, which was part of the so-called Second Polish Republic. It was in the Second Polish Republic that OUN was formed, and its military branch UPA was formed. It was there when Bandera came to sort of prominence. This is all bullshit. Yes, the super prominent Nazi presence in Ukraine. Have I already mentioned the brilliant conspiracy theories of Russia where Ukrainians are simultaneously all Nazis because there's this huge Nazi presence in Ukraine, but also at the same time all the Ukrainian refugees in Poland are terrified of Polish people more than the Nazis? Like, sure. Can I get some evidence on that super big presence? It was part of the Soviet Union. How did the Soviet Union sort of grow this Nazi presence in Ukraine?
In the army and in the government.
In the government, there's a big presence. There's a big Nazi presence in the current Ukrainian... Now I really need a citation on this. Who are the Nazis in the current Ukrainian government? Who are they? Because as far as I know, the Ukrainian government has not really changed in significant ways since 11 months ago. So who are the Nazis? Where is the Nazi presence in the current Ukrainian government?
I like to call neo-Nazi. I don't know what neo-Nazi is. I don't know Nazi.
Oh boy. A famous scholar doesn't know what a neo-Nazi is. A neo-Nazi, I'm okay. We have to explain what a neo-Nazi is for Mr. Finklestein. So neo-Nazi is a person that in the post-World War II era takes upon themselves Nazi beliefs. They basically take on the whole ideology, the whole thing of being a Nazi without actually being part of the German Nazi party. There we go. I've solved it for you. That's a neo-Nazi. What the fuck? What is going on here? That is just neo-Nazi is not just some fancy smancy new term. It's been in circulations for decades now. Actually, neo-Nazi has been in circulation. I don't know what a neo-Nazi is. Is it a spice? Is it a country? Is it edible?
They have an oversized Nazi presence in their armed forces, in their government.
Yes, one unit within the army that makes, I don't know, some minuscule percent of the Ukrainian army. That's this huge presence within the Ukrainian army, the over-representation of Nazis in the Ukrainian army, a single unit. Okay, perfect. I guess that unit is the brain of the entire Ukrainian army.
They see that this government, which came to power in a coup, which was backed by...
Yes, the current government that came to power in a coup, which which I guess is a synonym which I guess is a synonym for what we call democratic elections, because that is basically how the current government came to be. Because you had the Yanukovych that fled, then you had that temporary president that was sort of chosen, that he reigned for, I don't know, I think he reigned only for a few months. Then there was an election and a new president was actually chosen. That president that was chosen for a few months, he's not even listed on as he's not even given a number as a president. He's just sort of listed as like an in-between temporary president. There were elections. Come on. That is... But of course, we have the same conspiracy bullshit over and over and over again from the so-called US leftists.
United States, they see that government allied with a hostile military bloc.
Yes, of course. The only part that's missing is Finklestein just saying outright that Euromaidan was a CIA operation. That would be like the strawberry on the shortcake of bullshit that we usually get. This is so annoying. But unfortunately, it is not something unexpected.
They see this hostile military bloc moving step by step, step by step.
Step by step. Ooh, baby. Oh, see? I know my songs, I guess. This is bullshit once again. Step by step, countries choosing to join NATO because they don't want to be invaded by Russia. Is what you mean, but whatever. Whatever.
Closer to the Russian border.
Yes, NATO clearly has a big plan of invading Russia.
They see weapons being poured in, advisors being poured in. They see
yes, there's clearly there was a big invasion coming from NATO. Clearly that was the plan all along.
military exercises between the Ukrainian government and this hostile military bloc called NATO.
This is such. We're just entering fantasy now. We're just entering like La La Land. No, no, wrong. We've been in La La Land long ago with the 27 million Russians dead. Sure.
And they see that it's only a matter of time before there are
Before what? Before NATO invades?
nuclear-tipped missiles within 5 minutes range of Moscow.
Yes. That makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense that in the Budapest memorandum, that makes perfect sense to ask, was it 94? To ask Ukraine to get rid of its nuclear arsenal in 94, only to actually bring it back. That's perfect. That's what... Yes. That makes actually perfect sense to make Ukrainian give up all of its nuclear arsenal in 94 in the Budapest memorandum, because the actual plan all along was to actually install the nukes again in Ukraine. Yes. I see we have another second thought. Basically, yeah. Also, I gotta ask, okay, it might be a stupid question for me to ask. Wait, how? Okay, I actually have to look this up now, because I'm... "30 minutes. Oh, because he's crying here that there would be nukes in the range of 5 minutes from Russia. It would take a land-based missile about 30 minutes to fly between Russia and United States. A submarine-based missile could strike in as little as 10 to 15 minutes after launch. Nuclear missiles are fast and have range. There's no need to... the US has zero need to install nukes in Ukraine to be able to strike Russia fast. Like that's nonsense. That's absolute... This is brainless from a supposed... This person is a respected academic, at least when it comes to Israel-Palestine, but I guess his brain just switches off when it comes to Ukraine for some reason. Like, what sense would it make for the US to push Ukraine to give up its nuclear arsenal, only to supposedly have this grand plan to install it all again? It just makes no sense at all.
On their border. Now,
yes, Ukrainian... Yes, nuclear missiles on the border. Like, okay, classic. Classic.
Why do I go through all this? Because I began by
classic
saying, I don't think your analogy with Mexico works. Because I don't see any comparison between what the Russian people experienced in the 19th and then the 20th century.
Oh, you want to talk about what the Russian people experienced in the 19th and 20th century? What about what the Ukrainian people experienced in the 19th and the 20th century? Or does it not matter? Or does it not sort of factor in your calculus? Oh wait, again, I keep forgetting myself. Ukrainian people as well as all other people that were enslaved by the Russian Empire. They're just pawns. They are just pawns between players. It feels like Norman Finklestein has been sort of inspired, heavenly inspired, by great thinkers such as Alexander Dugin. Like literally, this is Dugin logic. Dugin tier. I might as well be listening to Dugin right now. With this level of analysis. I guess. Honestly, I might as well be listening to Dugin. At least Dugin does not pretend to be some cool leftist that fights for rights right. At least Dugin outright says, I'm against human rights, I'm against democracy, I'm against all these things. At least Dugin has the balls to outright say, oh yeah, Ukraine should be attacked because Russia needs to rebuild its empire, and that's that. That's at least, at least I get some honesty from Dugin. I mean, I don't know. I just simply think that people should be able to uphold a certain level of consistency when it comes to their own beliefs.
And what Mexico experienced, yes, once in a while the United States has invaded Mexico. That's true. And the United 2/3 of Mexico was annexed by the United States. That's true. That part, yes. But what does that have to do with comparing the threat of Mexico to the United States?
Yes, the threat of Ukraine to Russia.
With the threat of NATO against Russia.
This is bullshit. This is such a bullshit comparison. Because Mexico would not be NATO in this comparison. It would be Ukraine. Like this whole NATO line is just... it's just...
I think if that's a disqualified disanalogy, I think that the fact that Ukraine has never invaded Russia.
Here we go. What's the answer to this? Oh, Ukraine doesn't matter. It's all about NATO.
Would be disqualifying for a lot of the historical argument. I would also point out that if we're just sort of endorsing
Jesus, is he not gonna mention that that Soviet Ukraine existed, that Ukrainian people died in World War II, bled for, the fight against Nazis, all that stuff? No, we're not. No, okay.
Nationalist narratives based on historical memory, then Ukrainians too have been traumatized by the experience of World War II. Absolutely. And so you could equally say if you're talking about
well, if you agree, then how can you pull that number of 27 million Russians dying in World War II out of your ass?
Ukraine's government wanted to have the protection.
He's talented in one regard, but what makes him a hack is that he's lazy, dishonest, campist in every other regard. You want a hot take? You want a hot take from me? No, he's not talented in one regard. Okay, it's time for a Lucy hot take. He's just a lazy, dishonest, campist hack. It just happens that his dishonest, campist hackery has landed him in a correct position in one instance. In which case, he could go on and formulate his thing correctly on the basis of that. That is my opinion. There you go. You can fight me. You can debate me on this. That is my opinion. That is just a hack that is campus, and his campus hackery has landed him on a correct position in one instant, which aligns with his camp. Here we go. I did it. I did it. I did a hot take.
Of a larger military bloc having that.
He doesn't have some special insight. It just happens to align with his already campus beliefs. Here we go. I've done it.
Active memory of invasion by a hostile power, I think, has, is going to feed into that also.
Okay, Ben, first of all, I have to shut up and let you speak. So I have to be careful about that. So I want you to complete your thought. It's totally unfair for me to dominate. Is your thought complete?
Dominatrix Finklestein.
Oh, well, the thought was just that they have that I don't think that the fact that there is a nationalist narrative that makes some internal sense here on one side, I don't think that's dispositive. I think there's actually a very similar national narrative on the other side of the war that makes a lot of sense internally, and I also think that
shaking my head.
I also think the left should be should be skeptical of nationalist narratives in general. That I think that there's a value to maintaining an independent perspective, and especially when we're talking about a war that is, let's remember, launched by the handpicked successor of the people who destroyed the Soviet Union and imposed all of that shock therapy that you're talking about, that involves massive death by working class Russians who are drafted, in many cases trying to flee to other countries to avoid being drafted to fight in the war. I think that
I probably read him, so I have to defer to your knowledge.
The mere fact.
So what I'm saying is he might be good and correct on Israel-Palestine, but I'm starting to think that's just because it aligns with his campus beliefs. Like if somehow by some miracle Ukraine would also align with his campus beliefs of US bad, NATO bad, then he'd probably be good on that too. It's just, I don't know. I think there's dishonesty here. Quite honestly. And a lot of ignorance. Like 27 million Russians killed in World War II. That's just laziness. Which is very weird coming from an academic. Like, I had academics in my family. Like, my grandfather would never approach a topic and just spout bullshit like this. Never. Like, even if something was not in his field, in his direct field, like, I'm gonna give you an example. My grandfather was a professor of law, primarily. Law was his thing. And economics. He wanted to marry the theory of law of economics together, and he sort of worked around that. Around the theories of sort of marrying the concepts from law and economics. That was his field. But he was also interested in history. And he didn't approach history in this bullshit, half-assed way just because it was not his primary field of expertise. He actually took it seriously enough to, actually read it. Like, you cannot enter a new subject and talk about it with a huge amount of authority, a huge amount of confidence, while saying things like 27 million Russians died in World War II. Like, you just cannot. It disqualifies you from the conversation, in my mind, immediately.
That there's a sort of internally coherent nationalist narrative that on some level is historically understandable. I mean, I think that's true of a lot of national wars, oftentimes on multiple sides. I don't think, and this is the last thing I'll say on this and throw to you to kind of have the last word, and then I want to touch on a couple of other subjects before our time together ends, right?
Yes, my grandfather was 85. Was that pushing 70?
Don't think that that's enough to justify, to think that launching the war is justified.
Okay, Ben. First of all, I recoil at the word narrative. I've never liked that word because it's as if to say, well, there's a Jewish narrative.
Yeah, because I'm sorry, because you don't understand the word. Let's hear you out.
The Nazi Holocaust, and there's a Nazi narrative to the Nazi Holocaust.
Well, no, that's bullshit. Again, that's bullshit. And actually, you know what? Yes, I'm gonna say it. Yes, there is a Jewish sort of narrative. Jewish understand is when we take, because I know what's happening here. He's taking the word narrative as in to mean conspiracy, sort of plot, narrative. You're spinning a narrative. But if we take it as to what it actually means, then yes, there is a narrative, the perspective of the Jewish people when it comes to the Holocaust. And yes, there is a narrative of the Nazis about the Holocaust. But guess what? One narrative is the lived experience of the Jewish people that experienced the Holocaust, and the other narrative is the bullshit that the Nazis span in order to do the Holocaust. And in order to fully understand the Holocaust, you do also need to understand the Nazi narrative about it. Like, it's unavoidable. There you go. I've said it.
But let's explore that. I mean, you were just talking about the weaponization.
There you go. I've said it.
Both the memory of the Holocaust, that they have look at what happened to us before, look at the traumatic event, never again is so often used to justify Israel's crimes. I mean,
I'm going to beg you.
I've engaged with the whole narrative thing, the Nazi and the Jewish narrative. I've engaged, and I don't think I even. I stand by it. Basically, my another hot take for the night.
Even though I've hogged the show, I'm going to beg you to just hear me out.
Sure.
27 million people killed is not a narrative.
It is a narrative. When you claim that it was all Russians, yeah, it automatically becomes part of a narrative. Also, all history is a narrative. You have to narrativize history in order to make any sense of it, because otherwise it's just a collection of events. So actually, you do need to narrativize history to even be able to comprehend it in any way. But that's a whole other topic. There is no history without narrativization.
It's a historical fact. Now the number may be a little more, it may be a little less, it may be a little more.
Who are the people killed? Finklestein. Who are the people killed? Norman.
Nobody quarrels with the order of magnitude that we're talking about, somewhere in the area of 27 million people. Now, Ukraine has its corpses.
Yeah, within these 27 million that you've just quoted, you idiot.
And I have to acknowledge that. I don't agree it was a genocide, but something horrible happened during the during the 1930s in the Ukraine. I'm not going to dispute that.
In the what?
During the 1930s in the Ukraine.
In the Ukraine, of course, the Ukraine.
Ukraine. I'm not going to dispute that. I'm not going to quarrel with it.
And yes, it was a genocide.
The basic facts, as I say, it's not a narrative. It's a fact. Large numbers of people were killed.
Okay, the Finklestein just doesn't understand what the word narrative means. Got it? I got it. Okay.
Whether it was 8 million or 1 million, I don't know. and I'm not saying that because I'm being glib. I've just not studied it closely enough
I don't think you've studied it at all.
to.
To be bluntly speaking, I don't think you've studied it nearly enough to be speaking on it, at least. You should, after the 27 million Russians, you should just gracefully excuse yourself from this topic and, I don't know, read a bunch of literature documents or whatever to actually know anything on the topic. This is quite embarrassing.
To pass a judgment. We could just say large enough that it's a national trauma. No question in my mind about that. But Ukraine got its independence in 1991 or 1990 and 91. I can't remember right now.
Well, and yet Russia did all in its power to undermine it at every step of the way. How can you have independence and sovereignty if you cannot choose what alliance to join, if you cannot choose what sort of economic bloc you want to be a part of? Then I'm sorry, what sort of independence is that? Oh yeah, it's worth shit, isn't it? That sort of independence. Oh yeah, you're independent now. You're separate. The USSR is done. Oh yeah, that's total independence. So I guess, yeah,
No.
sure.
So if the former Soviet Union denied Ukraine its right to independence, I would say that's a real problem.
Yeah, it didn't. Russia did. Russia did deny Ukraine its independence by having a problem with it joining NATO, by having a problem with it joining the European Union, by having a problem with it distancing itself from Russia itself. Yeah, it basically did deny Ukraine its independence by doing those things. Yeah, that's right. Correct.
They suffered enough. They have the right to their self-determination and their independence. Both historical facts. I
No, you're not.
won't call them narrative.
Ironically enough, you're actually spinning a narrative here. You've actually been spinning a narrative all this time with the whole Napoleon thing, with the whole Nazi thing, with the whole historical memory thing. You've been spinning a narrative, whether you acknowledge it or not. All that you've been doing all this time.
I detest that word. I'm respecting, honoring,
I'm sorry, what?
I won't call them narratives. I detest that word.
Well, you are spinning narrative, so you can deny it all you want. That is what you're doing. Right? If you tell us of being killed and traumatized and that this memory has sort of carried through to their fear of NATO, that is a narrative. That is a narrative. I'm sorry. You can just cope about it all you want, but yeah. Yes.
I'm respecting, honoring, acknowledging, and not conceding, acknowledging both historical facts of what happened to Russia during the Soviet Union during World War II, and also what happened to Ukraine in the 1930s due to policies by Stalin. In my opinion, they weren't genocidal. The fact of the matter is that Ukraine had all the grain, and for Russia to industrialize, they need the grain to export it for industrial goods. How it was done? Totally unacceptable. I recognize that. But whether it was a determination to exterminate the Ukrainian people as a people, no, that's just not correct.
Yeah, okay, oh God. I'm not even gonna here to have a bullshit take on the Holodomor as well. Oh yeah, it's not that Stalin wanted to genocide the Ukrainian people. It's just that the Ukrainians had all the grain and Stalin wanted to export all the grain, so Stalin was basically forced to deprive Ukrainians of any food that would allow them to live. That is such solid logic. That is. I wonder if you would say that same thing about the Israel-Palestine situation, though. I wonder.
Incredible, in my opinion. But to some extent, it's a semantic question. Large numbers of colossal numbers of Ukrainians.
No, it's not a semantic question, you idiot. No, it's not. It's a very serious legal question. It's a legal question on how we look at intent, how we derive intent, how we come to the conclusion on what we consider a genocide, because it also influences how tried. No, it's not a semantic question. That is such a stupid thing to say. Let's move on.
Were killed.
Let's move on from the Holodomor.
I acknowledge that fact, acknowledge what happened in Russia. They had their independence. Now, if Russia were threatening, denying Ukrainian independence in the interim between 1990 and today.
Oh, are you saying they didn't? Like they totally did in their documents that if they do this or that, there will be trouble. They will be forced to act. You mean like that? By saying that Ukraine is not a real place, not a real country. Like that. This is just...
I would say then Russia has a large amount of culpability about what happened.
Oh, it would then just become a large amount of culpability. Got it. Got it.
But Russia demanded two things. Two things.
Yes, it basically just demanded Ukraine to be relegated to a puppet-like state. It's just great. That's the only thing.
A neutral Ukraine.
So basically that already throws out the window. That already throws out the whole argument about independence of Ukraine, because if Ukraine cannot do what it wants, then it's not really independent, is it? Oh, we're giving you your independence and sovereignty, but you better be neutral. You better not go against what you want. We're basically gonna dictate your international, like, foreign policy. How is that independence? How is that independence in any way, shape, or form? Like, how is that independence? We're gonna dictate your foreign policy for you. You better be neutral or else. Sure. That's a really interesting way to view independence.
Aligned with neither a Western military bloc nor an Eastern military bloc.
We're gonna choose for you who your allies will be, by the way. Enjoy your independence and sovereignty. Because everybody knows that a sovereign nation, that a sovereign state is a state whose policies are dictated by a third party. That's the very definition of the independence and sovereignty, as we all know.
And some kind of autonomy rights for the Russian-speaking people in the Donbass.
Yes, of course. Because, as we all know, Russian speakers had zero autonomy in Ukraine. It is known.
Neither of those demands in any way, shape, manner, or form in any way impinged on Ukrainian sovereignty.
Excuse me? Can I hear that again? I need to hear that again.
In any way, people in the Donbass, some kind of autonomy rights for the Russian-speaking people in the Donbass. Neither of those demands in any way, shape, manner, or form in any way impinged on Ukrainian sovereignty.
Let me get this straight. Russia wanted to directly dictate Ukraine's foreign policy, what its allies can be, what sort of blocks it can sort of integrate itself with, what sort of markets it can function in, but it does not in any way interfere with Ukraine's sovereignty? What does sovereignty mean to this guy? I don't think we understand sovereignty in the same way. By that logic, the Polish People's Republic was a sovereign country, which we all know it wasn't.
The decision of whether to join NATO could just have been made by NATO. NATO could say, thank you for the application, but we're not prepared to process it right now. That's all. That's not impinging on NATO's sovereignty.
What?
I agree that it would have.
That's what?
Apply to Rutgers University and they deny you entry because you didn't meet their entry criteria, you can't say that my son, because you didn't review NATO's sovereignty. Now, that's a thank you for the application, but we're NATO could just have sovereignty. The decision of whether to join NATO could just have been made by NATO. NATO could say, thank you for the application, but we're not prepared to process it right now.
What does that have to do with what? What are you? I really don't know what the point is here. I don't even know what the point is here.
That's all.
What is the point being made here?
That's not impinging on NATO's sovereignty.
Yeah, because NATO is not a sovereign state. It's an alliance of NATO sovereignty.
I agree that it would have.
If you apply to Rutgers University and they deny you entry because you didn't meet their entry criteria, you can't say that my sovereignty has been violated.
What
is your point here? What?
That's a decision.
I just want to point out, Norm, that quite a bit of this is directed against things I haven't said. So that they have a in fact, one of the first things I said is I agree NATO expansion was a bad idea. I agree that NATO.
Yes, allowing countries to seek safety from Russia was clearly a bad idea. I swear, I love when, no offense, I love when Americans speak of those things without understanding any of it. I just love it. It is so easy for two dudes from America to say, oh yeah, it was such a horrible idea, this NATO expansion thing. You know, this thing that countries depended on to actually free themselves from Russia in their minds permanently.
Not, seeking or allowing Ukrainian membership would be a good idea. That we agree on. The question
what does that have to do with anything? With the fact that Russia directly wanted to dictate what bloc, what alliance Ukraine can and cannot seek to join? Nothing. And that is actually directly interfering with Ukraine's sovereignty. 1,000,000,000%.
That we disagree on. The central question is whether
the threshold question.
Is whether the Russian invasion is justified. I'd also point out that what I was saying about Ukrainian corpses was not actually about the famine. It was about the experience of the Nazi invasion. That just as that's part of the collective memory of Russians, that's part of the collective memory of Ukrainians. And they have
Does Mr. Finklestein not know about the existence of Soviet Ukraine?
Point I just wanted to make is what I'm calling a narrative is not the devastation of World War II. What I'm calling a narrative is the linking of the devastation of World War II to the justification for present Russian foreign policy.
True. Thank you. That is indeed narrativizing history. Thank you. That is indeed unironically narrativizing history. Finklestein seems to be unavoidable these days, and I despise him so much. He is the most confident liar I have ever witnessed. Oh, welcome. Welcome to my personal hell. And also welcome to the stream. Is it your first time being here? If it is, then I hope you are enjoying yourself as much as it's possible, considering the circumstances.
Much the same way that the Holocaust is not a narrative, but I think what you're correctly critiquing in the Holocaust industry is what I would call a narrative, which is the linking of the Holocaust to the justification for what Israel does. Oh, never again. Look at what happened to us before. We could never allow this to happen again.
Also, never again. Sad. It is sad what a empty slogan never again became. It is such an empty slogan at this point that sarcastic people have said that never again actually means never again will Nazi Germany exterminate Jewish people during the 1940s. That is how the most cynical of people interpret the never again mantra.
Therefore, we need to stay strong. Therefore, we need to do all of these things. That is a nationalist narrative. And similarly, I think that the linking of the trauma of World War II to the justification for the present kind of oligarchic gangster capitalist government of Russia doing what it does in Ukraine, that's a narrative that's worth questioning. And I guess I'm very like I guess I wonder what it adds to saying American foreign policy has been wrong.
Yes, it's all about the American foreign policy, by the way. Ukraine, as always, has nothing to say about anything. I actually don't think Finklestein is a Zionist, so surprisingly enough, Finklestein is actually, I'm pretty sure, anti-Zionist in his whole body of work on Israel-Palestine. No? Isn't he?
That we shouldn't have sought NATO expansion, that it's that right now, for the sake of both Russians and Ukrainians, we should be promoting de-escalation.
No, he's revisionist, pro-Palestinian from what I've read. Okay.
Peace negotiations, all of that stuff that we agree on, right? I'm wondering what it adds to that to say, and also launching this war was,
and again, Finklestein has said, maybe not here, but I know that he said in some different thing, in some different group panel thing, he said that Russia had the moral right to attack Ukraine. Not just because of geopolitics or whatever. He said that Russia had the moral right to attack Ukraine, which is a laughable proposition.
Was justified. I mean, what's the...
You could say, listen, you could say as a tactical consideration, and also to remain within the spectrum of, at the extremes of respectable opinion, whereby you...
Well, I think I'm outside of the extremes of respectable opinion. I mean, I've spent the last year having people call me a Putin apologist because I want negotiations, but I do wonder if it makes it easier to discredit that perspective.
Because in my opinion, you can't apply In most situations, I should say you can
What have you considered that he's pushing 70?
apply, in most situations, a fairly hard and fast rule. So,
Yeah.
for example, under international law, in particular, Article 51 of the United Nations Charter, excuse
Hmm.
me, Chapter 51 of the United Nations Charter, that you're only allowed to engage in war of self-defense if there is an imminent, uh, basically an imminent, irreversible threat of attack. Either
Hmm.
you are actually attacked, or the attack is imminent, irreversible, and so forth.
Is he gonna claim that Russia is not such a case?
Those criteria. So by that criteria, Russia fails. Was the rule that
What?
Charles
What? Russia fails by that criteria when it launched its full-scale invasion and just went for Kyiv. It fails. Oh. So Ukraine is not fighting a war of self-defense. This is just...
de Gaulle, the head of state of France, he invoked in 1967 during the Arab-Israeli War. He says,
I'm sorry, I have to listen to this again.
Russia, and either you are actually a war of nations charter, that you're only allowed to engage in war of self-defense if there is an imminent, basically an imminent, irreversible threat of attack. Either you
Okay.
are actually attacked, or the attack is imminent, irreversible, and so forth. Those criteria. So by that criteria, Russia fails.
By that criteria, Nazi Germany fails when it attacked Poland. Absolutely, it does. If we are to take this sort of criteria, then sure, Nazi Germany fails.
Was the rule that Charles de Gaulle, the head of state of France, he invoked in 1967 during the Arab-Israeli War. He says, the party that's guilty of aggression is the one that fires the first shot.
Hmm.
If you
Oh
fire
God! Again, he talks about this again. He talked about this in his other thing when he said that Russia had the moral right to attack Ukraine.
the first shot, you're guilty of aggression. And so by that standard, Russia is guilty of aggression. My view, however,
Okay. It didn't just fire the first shot. It also breached Ukraine's borders and it entered Ukraine. It invaded Ukraine. It didn't just whatever.
is these kinds of hard and fast legal rules do not work in all situations. And it is my belief that if you factor in
Yes.
the lived experience of many Russian people and the desperate efforts of the Russian leadership to reach a reasonable diplomatic resolution of the conflict.
That is such bullshit. I was just joking. By that logic, Nazi Germany does fail. Have you considered the lived experience of the many Germans? You know that Germans were supposedly treated really badly in Poland, right? You know, the German minority in Poland. Have you considered that Germany did everything in its power to resolve the situation diplomatically and peacefully by asking Poland to basically accept Gdańsk not as a free city anymore, but as a German city, and to allow Germany to build a neutral highway through the territory of Poland to East Prussia? have you considered that actually Nazi Germany, by this logic, fails the invasion test if you take into consideration the lived experience of Germans and Germany trying the route of diplomacy with Poland, which Poland failed to accept? Oh, that's amazing. I'm learning today, watching this debate, that Poland actually did not fight a war of self-defense against Nazi Germany. That's that is that is interesting. That is indeed interesting.
And factor in the rejection by the US effectively, because many of the NATO countries like Germany and France would have gone for it if it weren't for the US uh, rejection.
Of course, because Ukraine is not even a factor. It's about the US rejecting. Because, of course, uh, yeah, Ukraine is totally independent and sovereign, but not really, right?
The rejection of all these reasonable diplomatic initiatives by Russia.
Yeah, all these reasonable diplomatic initiatives by Nazi Germany towards Poland, sure. And Poland so ungratefully just rejected them all. And so, basically, if you think about it that way, then you have to come to the conclusion that Nazi Germany was basically forced to invade Poland in 1939. There's no,
And if you factor in that the facts on the ground were not stable, but
This guy knows nothing about this topic but speaks with such confidence. It's amazing. It's amazing to behold. It's just, wow.
constantly shifting against Russia to the point that there was a real fear that unless they did something now, there would be nuclear tipped missiles on their border.
Again, the US was the party that pushed for Ukraine to give up its nuclear arsenal. Maybe you would know it if you'd learn anything about this region of the world. The little known event called the Budapest Memorandum. Well, the word politically falls into three diplomatic spheres now: China, Russia, and America, EU. Well, there's also the growing power of India, but that's neither here nor there. So you get why he ignores Ukraine's actual government to an extent, but he's doing it to ignore the on-the-ground facts. It's so infuriating.
Within 5 minutes range of Moscow.
That argument is totally bullshit. That the whole 5 minute range warheads, that's just total fiction.
When you factor in all of those elements, it seems to me that they prevail over that Article 51 stipulation. That's how I reason it.
Yeah, and you could reason it for Nazi Germany in the exact same way. Interestingly enough, Nazi Germany also prevails. Wow.
But I have said I can understand where others feel the threshold of provocations had not reached a sufficient
Again,
enough
provocation is when countries want to join NATO because they want to feel safe from Russia. Just a reminder.
degree as to warrant a Russian attack. I do, however, put a challenge to those who hold that view, like Professor Chomsky, even Aaron Mate, presumably yourself. My challenge is very simple. At what point in your mind do the provocations reach a degree, a magnitude, as to justify a Russian attack?
Never, because those are not provocations. This is such a dishonest question that I'm not even gonna engage in the way you want. Never. The answer is never. Do you know when Russia, the provocations end when Russia stops being such a messed up country? This is when the provocation of countries joining NATO of their own free will end. That is my answer. This is just dishonest. This is just dishonest. A highly dishonest challenge. Oh, Jesus.
Would you say that if missile launchers were placed on the border?
Yes, because totally nuclear missile launchers would be placed on the border of Ukraine and Russia. That's a totally reasonable inference to make based on the history of this region.
But not yet the nuclear-tipped missiles. Would that be sufficient warrant?
Yes, totally that would happen. Mm-hmm.
For a Russian attack?
No, just like I don't think that the United States had a right to interfere in Cuba because of missiles being placed there.
The Cuban Missile Crisis. Oh no. Oh crap. Ooh.
I don't think that situations aren't analogous at all. In the case of Cuba, the United States was preparing for an invasion of Cuba.
And yet it didn't. What do you know?
Very moment, the U.S. was preparing for invasion of Cuba.
And yet it didn't. What do you know? Preparing schmeparing. It didn't invade. Like, preparation is worth nothing if it's not followed by action. Did the U.S. invade Cuba? No, it did not.
I think that
it's an empty argument at the end of the day.
I think that that nuclear deterrence is obviously a horrible game to have to play. It's awful, but it has been, the track record, does suggest that countries being in a position to immediately wipe each other out. And by the way, I think by the time we're getting to 2023. The significance of exactly how close it is to the border has gotten just logistically much less relevant to that.
True. Exactly. I've been saying this a long time ago. It's not even relevant if the nukes are near the border the striking capabilities are quite. How does he imagine nuclear arsenal to work that he thinks that it needs to be placed at the border? For some reason,
threat it's
just ridiculous.
I don't think that justifies the invasion, nothing. And I'm also not. I'm also.
It literally changes nothing.
I'm also not very sympathetic to giving too much weight to lived experience when it over principles, which is by the way where we agree on the primary thesis of your book.
I find it very difficult, and it's actually I don't want to dramatize it or be emotive.
Yeah.
But it would be a complete betrayal of my parents' life experience to say that the lived experience of people like myself. I said Putin is my age. And
oh shit! Oh, that is so relevant. That Putin is your age. Oh, before. Oh yeah. Oh yes. That. Oh that. That changes everything. That. Ooh.
Go look at that Wikipedia. It's just 4 sentences about his childhood. It was all about people who were killed during the war. Mm-hmm. That lived experience has very deep resonances in me. I mean, to the point that it makes me kind of
Sure. I
angry.
mean, it also has very deep
Well,
Yeah, because this is so stupid. I'm sorry. Like, this is brain dead.
resonances for Ukrainian
yeah, but no,
politicians
but
who have
Ukraine
who's
got
who are
independence.
worried about invading.
Yeah, and Ukraine got independence, like controlled independence, just like in Helldivers too. It's like controlled democracy in Helldivers. You have controlled independence in Ukraine. You're sort of independent, but then again, if you want to step out of line, then we might need to invade. Like, for example, if you choose to, I don't know, enter the European market or integrate yourself with the European Union in general, or maybe join NATO. Um, in that case, your independence becomes a little bit, controlled, for the lack of the better word.
Invasion by a for
Right, but they got their
by their
independence.
neighbor and seek out military alliance. I mean, I think lived experience can't decide this question. I think there's too much of it going around.
As John Mearsheimer pointed out numerous occasions.
Oh God, Mearsheimer. Of course, Mearsheimer's being. Oh God. Yeah, the realist. Sure, go on. What does he point out many times?
Up until like 2014, 15, nobody even talked about a threat posed by Russia.
Excuse me? Sure, Poland just joined NATO for the shits and giggles of it. Sure.
That was not even a subject of conversation.
Sure, of course. Especially for Chechnya, Georgia. Of course.
This whole thing about the threat posed by Russia has been just conjured out of thin air.
Oh yeah, of course. Such bullshit. Wow.
There was no threat posed by Russia. Go back, look for evidence that the United States regarded Russia as an expansionist power trying to restore the Holy Russian Empire.
There was no such thing as the Holy whatever. Okay, I guess all the countries that joined NATO did it for shits and giggles because they felt totally secure in the presence of Russia. Oh wait, actually to this guy it doesn't matter. What matters is what the US thought. Well, never mind.
There was nothing like that.
I think that you'll find Ukrainians in the 90s and 2000s,
the Poles and the Lithuanians and blah 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 blah. Yes.
Did think they had something to worry about there. And I don't think that you need to go all the way to trying to restore the Russian Empire to have that be the case. And remember, my point here is not that
Ukraine totally had nothing to worry about. Chechnya, Georgia, nothing.
It was therefore a good idea.
Are these things gonna be, I don't know, mentioned, pointed out, talked about? Nothing. No. That's no.
For NATO to expand into the region. I mean, if I had my way, NATO would have, they could have done a joint ceremony the day that the Warsaw Pact was dissolved, where they also dissolved NATO. They have a
Benjamin, but then you have to ask yourself a basic question: why are they doing it?
Doing what?
Why are they expanding?
Because countries want to join. Because they don't want to be invaded by Russia. Okay, let's find out. Oh damn. It feels like countries like Poland that were pretty defenseless joined a higher alliance, sort of a bigger alliance, in order to be able to defend themselves against threats, no matter where they came from. Primarily from Russia. What do you know? Such a mystery. Why do they do it?
Why are they
Why do they do it? Why do they do such horrid things? No way.
keeping moving east?
No
If
way.
they didn't have hostile, aggressive intentions,
Totally not. Totally did not show any hostile intentions by again invading Chechnya twice and Georgia. Just peaceful. Peaceful Russia. Dude, are you gonna say something?
why are they doing it? Is that a question that causes you to wonder?
No, because I'm not an idiot.
There was no desire on the part of Russia to come into collision with the West. They wanted to join the West.
Oh, sure.
They had this crazy idea that now the Cold War was over, there would be a continental wide security system.
Oh, yeah. And yet, along the way, Russia decided to do a little invasion here, a little invasion there, but, who doesn't do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why did the West persist? Why does it keep pushing further and further to the east? Why does it get Romania, Poland? Forget about the Baltic states.
Get Poland. Because, again, it's not like Poland wanted to join because of certain security concerns.
Which I can kind of get that point with the Baltic states. But then Russia said,
But you don't get it with Poland somehow, the ex-satellite state of the USSR? Are you serious? The country that was supposedly among the victors in World War II and yet got sold out to the USSR? Okay.
Georgia and Ukraine, they are red lines for us. Georgia and Ukraine, those are red lines for us. Stop it already. Stop pushing us.
Mm-hmm.
And as
Stop provoking. This is just, wow.
Lavrov, the foreign minister, said a week before the attack on Ukraine, we've now reached a boiling point. You won't stop. So the question I have is, if they didn't pose a threat, if they were just innocent...
I've already talked about this. This is total horseshit. Yes, Watcher 900. Finklestein has always sounded like this. Which is why I compare him to Jordan Peterson.
Babes in the woods.
Which, to be clear, nobody here has remotely implied.
Why are they doing this?
I don't know, because some countries wanted to join NATO because of a certain invasion trigger happy neighbor.
Doing this, there was a reasonable, easy solution.
Yeah.
Yes, there was a reasonable solution to just leave all of those countries for Russia to reclaim. Simple as.
Say that Ukraine would have the same status as Austria did after World War II, that Finland had after World War II. They would be neutralized.
And again, just to reiterate.
And just basically brought into the fold. Like Belarus.
One more time, what you're expressing is the part that we agree on. They have that would have been better. I mean, I certainly don't require any convincing that the U.S. military-industrial complex is dangerous.
Of course, Ukraine has no say. Of course, it doesn't matter what Ukraine wants to do, but it's totally independent and sovereign, you guys. Totally.
That there's always a very powerful hawkish lobby in Washington for feeding the coffers of military, of military contractors, for throwing around America's weight in the world.
And that is exactly why the U.S. is blocking aid right now.
And then all of this makes the world profoundly more dangerous, and it would have been much better.
Yes, it's all about the U.S. and the CIA, let's not forget. The CIA is the ultimate culprit behind everything in the world.
For that there are ample reasons to oppose U.S. policy.
I hate these people
in this regard. Whether those ample reasons to oppose U.S. policy add up to a reason to either in, putting aside the pragmatic question, just in principle, whether they add up to a reason to endorse Russian policy is a different question. But I do want to just say this. Norm, this has been so we're going a little bit overtime here because we're having such an interesting conversation.
No, it's a bullshit conversation. Like how I don't.
I would really like it if you came back on the show, because there are things that I would really like to talk about with you that we've barely touched on today. Because we got. I'm very happy with all the conversation we had, but there's a lot that we didn't get to, and I would very much like it if there was a part 2.
I'm afraid my publisher is going to string me up from a lamppost, because every interview I do, I end up talking about Ukraine, and we never get to the book.
Well, I promise if you come back, we will get to the book, because I think that the sort of core subjects of the book about identity politics and the conflict between identity and class-based politics, about academic freedom, about sort of unhelpful moralism on the left, are all ones that are very close to my heart, and I think we could have an interesting follow-up that really is focused on those questions. But I also want to
happened on Glenn's program, by the way. Except
what's that?
The same thing happened on Glenn's program an hour ago.
Is it over?
Except we also went down
a little bit close.
Last comment. And
yeah, please. Yep.
The last comment is, I recently read an article that was sent to me on the Ukraine issue.
Yeah.
And it was very striking how it ended, the article. I don't know how much you know about World War II. But as you know, there was
I know quite a lot, actually, about World War II. I forgot a lot about it, but I know quite a lot.
Called the Stalin Hitler or the Ribbentrop.
Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, sure.
Holy am I about to hear some unimaginable bullshit about the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact? I hope not.
Say it again?
Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact.
Yeah, Molotov-Ribbentrop, they called the Hitler-Stalin, whatever. Molotov.
Oh, how educated you are on World War II, Norman.
Ribbentrop Pact. And
seriously?
For reasons which have always perplexed me, Stalin really believed that this pact was going to hold up. So when the Russians launched Operation Barbarossa to attack the Soviet Union was completely unprepared. And the first months were utterly devastating.
That's actually not true. That's technically speaking not exactly true. The USSR was actually not all that badly prepared. The problem was not preparedness of the Soviet Union. The problem was that Stalin did not give the permission for the Soviet Union to defend itself, which caused, for example, the Soviet Union in the first few days of the Operation Barbarossa to lose, and I don't think I'm exaggerating, 2,000 planes. Its entire air force was lost because Stalin simply refused to give permission for the Soviet army to fight back. And what made things worse is the systems that were put in place within the Soviet army. For example, The Soviet soldiers did not have access to live ammunition because Stalin was afraid that if they did, the Soviet army, the Red Army, could actually rebel at any moment, which is why the soldiers and the live ammunition were kept separately, and only after a permission was being given would the live ammunition be given to the soldiers. Same with planes. Planes would usually not have fuel in them, and only after a order was given, only after a permission was given, would the planes be allowed to be fueled, to be able to even take off the ground. Which meant that because Stalin has given no such orders, in neither case, the Soviet soldiers had nothing to defend themselves with, and also the planes were sitting ducks, just standing in plain sight for the Nazis to destroy. Interesting fact that is, no? Very fascinating. So that is basically what happened. But whatever.
The Wehrmacht and the Luftwaffe swept into Russia and wiped out the Soviet defenses, and actually
on paper, I would say, interestingly enough, on paper, the Soviet Union actually was stronger than Nazi Germany. Another interesting factoid, that at the day of the invasion of Nazi Germany, on paper, the Soviet Union actually had more stuff than Nazi Germany. Isn't that interesting? So that is, how it's funny how history works, right? I learned this from a book called The Deadly Embrace, which we might actually, maybe we'll do a reading of this book on stream. It's in English. Why not?
Hitler not embarked on the war of extermination, because in the East there was a war of extermination.
What's upsetting about all this is that I hear Finklestein is very well regarded for defense of Palestine. Seeing him to be 180 on this feels so dissonant from his usual stuff. I know. I think there's dishonesty involved here. I just think I said it earlier, you were not here for it, Watcher 900, but I think that Finklestein is a campist. I would go as far as to say he is a hack. And I just think that the Palestine issue just happened to align with his campist views, and so he landed on a correct position, and so he invested in it. And it's just, do you know what I mean? But with this, he just fumbles on basic facts. He said during this talk that during World War II, 27 million Russians were killed by the Nazis, when 27 million is the total deaths within the Soviet Union as a whole.
Had he not embarked on the war of extermination, probably could have won over a large number of the Russian people because of their experience, especially during the 1930s, of collectivization. In any event, it was a catastrophe for Russia, either the first 2 months or the first 6 months. My memory's not perfect on that. The point being, Putin kept saying, I am not going to repeat Stalin's error. I'm not going to wait until it's too late.
It wasn't an error. I'm sorry. Stalin was just a coward in that instance. It wasn't a bug, it was a feature. he thought that it was a bluff. He thought that Hitler was bluffing. Genuinely. Also, what is this? Putin was not gonna do Stalin's error. Ukraine did not invade Russia. It's the other way around. Putin is the Hitler in this scenario. This is such blatant dishonesty.
And
yes,
again,
NATO totally is preparing to do a Barbarossa on Russia. Truly the brilliant mind of our generation. Truly brilliant geopolitical analysis of the situation.
to me, it's not at all surprising that when he's dealing with what seems to be a new threat of a formidable threat of foreign invasion.
True. The only way to respond is to wage a genocidal war against Ukraine, declare that Ukraine is a fake country, declare that Ukraine is a fake nation, and also declared that all post-Soviet states belong to Russia and should be sort of, returned to it. That is the only logical conclusion that of course, why would he do anything different? Of course. Of course that all countries from the Soviet bloc are basically fake countries and they all just should be part of Russia. That's of course. Why didn't I think of that? Of course, he just felt threatened. It's just so logical and brilliant. You're such a genius, Finklestein. I marvel in your genius.
Napoleon in 1812, the Nazis in the 20th century, and now a new threat. It's not surprising.
And all of that is totally not a narrative, by the way. This whole, it's totally not a narrative. Totally. Finklestein hates the word, after all. Not a narrative.
To me, that his memory, and I don't think it's fake, because that's where my memory leaps.
Holy shit. That's just... This is just brain dead, and this is brain dead. Is this person truly a respected scholar? Wow.
That his memory goes back, and he says, after we get off, I can send you the link to the article.
Yes, my memory goes back, and so I need to genocide the Ukrainians. That is basic. Wow. Okay.
I'm not going to repeat that mistake. The mistake being waiting until it's too late. And that's why the brief...
Yes, that is exactly why Putin wrote an article a year late before the full-scale invasion explaining why Ukraine is a fake country. That is exactly why. It was just a preemptive defense against NATO. This guy has no clue about this region of the world. This guy has no clue about Russia. This guy has just taken a few points in history and unironically build a narrative around it, and is just spinning bullshit.
So to speak,
no engagement in reality.
Gravaman of our conversation was this evening, at what point do you reach a threshold and you could say, okay, they now have the right to invade? And to me, that's for the people who are honest about the history, namely the 30 years of Russia. And, Professor Chomsky, Mearsheimer, and all the rest, Jeffrey Sachs, Aramatai, they all agree on that 30-year period. No disagreement there. The question is, has a threshold been crossed? And I say that the concerns, worries, and historical memory of the Russians are legitimate elements to factor into the equation. Remember,
Sure,
I
but you can
said,
equally say that the
I said-
concerns and historical memories of Ukrainians, which include the same invasion, that they, that like Ukraine was invaded by the Nazis, and
True.
and that memory of invasion and the presence
True.
of a neighboring
don't think-
far more powerful country provides a
Okay,
powerful
but-
incentive to
but-
seek out a military alliance. Now,
then-
True.
but
I don't
that's one
think that
thing- that's one thing-
justifies
there's one
Ukraine
thing- there's one big
seeking out that
difference.
military alliance, but I think it does make
Yeah. You know what? Yeah, it actually totally does. Yes, it does actually justify it. Yeah. Actually, Ukraine needs no justification to join an alliance. What do you justify? Is it independent and sovereign or not?
it more
A
understandable.
sovereign, independent country needs no justification to join a military alliance.
And I don't think that these kinds of considerations could decide this.
There's one big difference. There's no evidence that Russia was going to attack Ukraine.
None at all. None in Putin's own writings, speeches, none in the Ukrainian, Russian media. No, totally not. Totally not.
All the evidence was totally the contrary. They had no
Oh.
interest after 1991. Putin kept
Totally.
saying it. He said, I'm sorry we
Oh, he kept saying it, just like he kept saying he wouldn't invade Ukraine in 2022. He kept saying that as well, all the way till the day of the invasion.
lost to Ukraine. But he
Yeah,
said,
Putin can totally be trusted on his word. Trust me, because I said so.
only a crazy person would try to recover it. However, I keep asking you the question, but not just you. If NATO had no aggressive designs, why did it persist?
Because countries in the because countries that are close to Russia are very, very careful about Russia's ambitions and hence want to join NATO. This is stupid. This is brainless.
I think that there's a difference between aggressive
Why couldn't
design.
NATO simply have said to Ukraine, not now? It would be perceived by Russia as too much of a provocation. Russia has not provoked you. Russia is
Wait, that's also bullshit. Because first of all, why did if it's supposed to be NATO in 2022, then NATO was not even on the table in 2022 because you cannot join NATO if you're in the middle of an active conflict, which Ukraine was with Russia ever since 2014. So NATO was not even on the table. And before 2014, as far as I know, Ukraine was not even all that interested in joining NATO. So the whole NATO is, of course, bullshit. But I don't expect Norman Finklestein to know these sort of
simply
things.
calling for a neutralized Ukraine. So we, NATO, tell you, thank you for your application. Application rejected.
Was there even there wasn't even an application. Oh, whatever.
Sure. And again, you're
There wasn't even an application at that point.
circling back to the thing that we've said 20 times that we agree on.
Yeah, but you have
That they have
that.
This
and
is
you
such
could. Yeah,
bullshit.
there's also a difference between saying
It's like blind leading the blind.
that there's some sense in which we're talking about aggressive intentions in terms of American dominance and hegemony in different parts of
NATO.
the world,
Expansion.
and thinking that there was literally going to be an invasion of Russia. I'd also point out that if we are going to talk about such scenarios, I don't think it's true that there's there's nothing that could make a Ukrainian nationalist sincerely paranoid about the possibility of Russian invasion of Ukraine. I mean, I think certainly the annexation of Crimea, certainly Russia's support for separatists in the Donbass. These are things that I think could make a sincere Ukrainian nationalist worried about that, just like everything you're talking about could make a sincere Russian nationalist, worried about encirclement and the historical memories that triggers. But I don't think that any of this is dispositive. I think that they certainly the very, very strong default, from a left wing perspective, a pro working class perspective, should be a strong opposition to starting wars for all of the obvious reasons. What we know this does to ordinary people in these countries.
I have no problem with that.
And we have a disagreement about whether that very strong default is overridden in this case.
Our disagreement is very simple. And then we're going to have to end at that. Not that I want the last word. The question is, who started the war?
Russia did. 100%. Yeah, Russia did. Easy answer. You just have no clue what you're out of your depth. I'm sorry. I'm by no means an expert, but it's clear that you're out of your depth.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe that the question of who fired the first shot is dispositive.
Yeah, it's not about who fired the first shot. This whole thing has been going. This whole thing, if you really want to go to history, has been going on for longer than the U.S. has existed. Then NATO has existed. What now?
Of who started the war?
Russia, 100%.
I think the war started at, if you want to go back to 1990, fine.
Oh, do you want to go back further? It started before NATO even existed.
But then, if we don't want to go back to 1990, then we go back to 2014 and the coup in the Ukraine.
Oh, coup. That bullshit theory that everybody accepted that Russia has lost the information war on, that nobody who's not a lunatic does not believe in. Sure, the coup in Ukraine. Can you provide any evidence of any coup in Ukraine? Who did the coup? Or let me guess, it was the CIA.
And then the civil war that ensued for the next...
what civil war?
From 2014 to 2022.
Civil war. No, he means 2014 and the coup.
The civil war that ensued, about 17,000 people that were...
Civil war.
Were killed. And then the gradual, the incremental but inexorable incorporation of Ukraine de facto into NATO. That to me,
that's wow.
Is
what a fault has. What have you done with Norman Finklestein? What a fault has.
When the war starts. That's
now we've totally entered the domain of alternative history.
Agreement. I don't accept the applicability of article of chapter 51 in the UN Charter that he who fires the first shot fired the war. I don't agree with that. I don't agree. If you look at the historical facts, that that's the correct way to read the historical record. But
you don't know the historical record, so how would you know about any of this? Like, to analyze the historical record, you'd have to first meet the criteria of actually knowing the historical record, which you clearly don't. So
that gets us very, very, very far away from how this whole thing started. Our whole conversation started by saying, this is the first time in my lifetime that there has been no left which has been arguing a position even critical of the current government. There has been no criticism, and that to me is a kind of it's a real eye opener. The extent to which these woke precincts like MSNBC are as
that's not the left. That's liberals.
Well, they're as fanatically pro-war.
Yeah,
pro-war.
And at least there's some dissent, you could say, of a of a smarmy kind, but there's some dissent in the far right. And it's a very funny thing now when I want to turn on anything critical of the
Yeah. It is actually how it is very interesting how much you align with the far right, isn't it? Well, now that makes me think. It does make me think, in fact. You're right. It does make me think how far you are aligning with Donald Trump on this. It makes me think how far you align with Mike Johnson on that. Makes me think, indeed.
war. I have to look
Uh,
at people like Colonel McGregor.
Well, you should
makes me think.
you should check out my articles in Jacobin. You'll see plenty of
Makes
criticism
one
there.
think. Okay, enough. Okay, enough. If you've enjoyed this whole mess, then press like, subscribe, bell, and all that other stuff. We've streamed for 1 billion gazillion hours. 6 hours or 5 hours because we've streamed for 1 hour before the OBS crashed. So love and solidarity. We love our non-binary siblings. We love, etc. Full of love. More love than you can ever handle. And yes. Thank you, fake Alec Halpert. I would probably not believe them, but thank you all for being here. And I will see you tomorrow, actually. I'll see you tomorrow. So good night, and yes, bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye. 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 Bye.